Hello everybody, it's Will here, and welcome to another episode of the Tapping Podcast. Before we dive in, I'd really like to take a moment and thank everybody who's tapped in with us up till now. It means so much to me that we can impact one another's lives in a way that is applicable to each other's lives. You know, having a real reason why this might help somebody is ultimately the reason I've chosen to speak up, so to say. And without saying too much more, I just want to say thank you to everybody that has supported me through listening, liking, or subscribing to my podcast page. Oh, what can I say? The patience of my listeners is something that is not unrecognized, and for that, I am humbly blessed. Thank you. As many of y'all know, the Gallery Lucid is my sponsor for this podcast. And it's an amazing art space. If you haven't checked it out, I highly recommend it. There's so much to offer, not just the amazing curation of some of the best art in the country at this point, but specifically Leah Dorian's first solo exhibition, Visions Rising, is going to be hanging at the gallery until December 8th, and you won't want to miss the viewing of these pieces. They are far out and on point. After that, none other than Elliot Rogers himself is having his first solo exhibition under the name Mindscapes, and during which he will perform music that he has been preparing for a very long time under the artist name Mystic Prism. This is a psychedelic, ambient, enthused music project that I am so happy to follow up as my own music project, Fugue. Links to these musics are gonna be in the comments to this video. And surprise, surprise, the intro song for this episode is a song that both Elliot and I have collaborated on, and we just thank you so much for enjoying it. Now, to listen to the entire feature song, follow our SoundCloud link in the comments. Now, my guest for this episode is none other than Erik Kuykendall himself, who is the main curator with his partner Samantha for the Gallery Lucid. In this episode, we are sitting within the gallery looking at all the art that had been showing at that time. And without too much further ado, I'm going to put us into that interview. Thanks for tapping in, and I hope you enjoy. How do I say it?
Kuykendall.
Oh, it's Kuykendall?
Kuykendall.
That's not spelled the way I've seen in the past. Like, what, I guess, like, where is that name from?
It's Dutch. Kürken are the little chickens in Dutch, or a church. So we're either chicken farmers from the valley or preachers from the valley.
Chicken preachers.
Chicken preachers.
That sounds like a Monty Python sketch, doesn't it? Oh, so we're sitting here in the Gallery Lucid, which is the visionary art gallery of Austin. Right now, in front of us, we see art from Juan Villegas, Juan Carlos
Amorotu.
Yeah, I'm not the best at last names. And who's this on the end?
That's Kaylee Espicia.
And then Juan's partner is Rosemary, and they collaborate.
They do collaborate. Now, we don't have their collaborations here. We have a few that are prints. This is just his work this month.
Did I leave anybody out?
No, those are the three who are showing this month.
All right, cool. You know what? This is a great collection of art. Just to describe some of the things we're looking at, there's literally like a oil painting of what would be Jesus, but it's a monkey pointing at a banana on, like, in the face of the Jesus portrait, which I think is pretty original. This artist also has like a realistic Hello Kitty face that I thought was really striking.
A hairless cat face, yes.
So let me ask you something. A lot of the art that hangs up here, it's visionary, right? So what, in your opinion, is visionary art? Because art's one thing, but visionary art seems to be maybe something more specific, or maybe it's more vague. How would you think?
Initially, when I looked at visionary art, I saw it as a specific genre. It has become more vague because individual visions are so very different. I believe visionary art is trying to express what it is. Putting this into words is more challenging than I thought.
Yeah, do take a minute if you want.
What I look for in visionary art is that someone is trying to put forth an idea, something they've either experienced or envisioned. Very often, visionary art comes from actual experiences, either meditating or after using an entheogen or having an experience shamanically.
Yeah, so a specific experience it is the elephant in the room, but it's this hypnagogic light machine. It's called the Lucia number 3, and it is a technology that can, let me know if I'm saying this right, it can induce a psychedelic experience.
Yes, what we're doing is we're using light to entrain the brain. Entrainment is a property in which frequencies approach each other. We do this when we sit next to each other. Our breath rates approach each other. Our heart rates approach each other. Our hormone levels approach each other. And binaural beats is one way to entrain the brain and bring up theta waves or gamma waves. We're using light pulses to entrain the brain. And by doing so, we're sending these photic signals down the optic nerve, and when they hit the central nervous system and fire back up into the third thing that's attached to the optic nerve, the pineal gland, it causes a real release of neurotransmitters, neurochemicals, and hormones that are associated with really deep levels of meditation.
Obviously, both of us have experienced this machine, and just to explain to people what it looks like, I might be able to find a video somewhere where do it and post that video. But you essentially sit in one of the chairs that you or I are sitting in right now, and then a light is placed in front of your face, not too close that it would burn your retinas or something like that, and then it strobes at a certain frequency that's been tuned by scientists, right, specifically to stimulate the pineal gland and the mind in general. So what's the longest amount of time you've ever sat under the light?
For any one session, probably an hour's time.
That's amazing. I've only done, the last time I did it, I came home from Sonic Bloom, and you looked at me and you're like, you need to sit down. I can tell. And then I sat down, and I was in there for what seemed about 15 to 20 minutes. And it definitely expounded and proliferated the longer I was within there. But it was so stimulating. By the end of it, I felt like I had enough to think about.
Yes. And
it greatly affects the way I portray my art and express myself. The things that I've seen in there, would you mind taking a second? We could both describe some of the things we've seen while sitting under this hypnagogic light therapy thing.
Certainly. As a matter of fact, that's how I ended up owning this gallery. Was I went under the light and had an experience unlike any other, and wanted to try to express visually what I had seen. And I started playing with spirographs and with digital spirographs, and I started working with a program that no longer exists anymore called geocone.net.
Oh, Geocone, huh?
Geocone.
Is that Japanese or something?
I don't know. I don't know.
Okay.
But it allowed me to set parameters on how a line would work, and I could create my own images. So I started creating these images that were reminiscent of what I experienced under the light.
They really are.
Thank you.
I'll certainly, hopefully, get some images I can put in the video for this on YouTube, but they are just like braided layers of
different pigmented light encircling each other in a fractal geometry that is multidimensional, and it's not flat, but it's all enveloping. You know, like if you were watching a movie, but the screen of, like at the Bobble, museum
Comes around you a bit.
Yeah, it's like slightly bent. It seems like you're more enveloped within the whole experience. But what's interesting about this, and this is something that a lot of people should listen to from this podcast, I think, if they take anything from it, because I talk a lot about like really deep psychedelic things, I think, personally. But I also want to relate those things to people who don't think that taking drugs orally or, like people who've been affected by drugs might not want to indulge in such things, or if you are a drug addict even, and you can't take alcohol in because it risks your life. This is a sort of thing that is so appropriate for you that you might even never need to take drugs again if you can tap into the concept of what this can provide for you, which is just a projection, of course, but that's what all of this is about, right?
Well, and this helps people get to themselves. The flashing light and the colors, they keep the monkey distracted. The monkey on the shoulder that's always talking shame and blame keeps the monkey distracted, and you get to go inside yourself. Now, I have people who come in who are very much into the drug culture and go, ooh, you're activating endogenous dimethyltryptamine. I have to have some of that.
Yeah, and I have to try it on drugs. I mean, that was
right?
That was like the first thing I thought was like, what is this like on drugs even? But it's, I've never tried that because it seems like it would just be gluttonous, if you know what I mean.
Well, the magic of the light is much more than most people recognize it to be. And honestly, even when I first tried the light, I didn't realize how big it was for me. I went up with an intention of potentially buying this, and I told the lady, hey, I'd like to try all the different contextual boxes that you've created, which I think there were 8 or 10 of them. And
that means like the different programs.
Yeah, we have about 200 programs, and she had put them into 8 categories.
Okay.
And I really wanted to just kind of get a flavor of each of the categories if I was going to be, utilizing this in my practice.
So different categories provide different hallucinatory experiences that are more like a curation of a certain type, right? Okay.
We have different light experiences. Some will... Almost the benchmark is a very happy experience. Some are more places where people find or report insightful experiences. There are those that are almost near death. But everybody experiences things differently, and no matter what the name is on the program, the person is going to experience it as the person is going to experience it.
Yes, this is a concept I was thinking of recently when I was watching a documentary about the financial crisis of 2008, and how Greenspan, I think is his name, was saying, like, you should tap into your home's equity. Like, and I realized that the idea of tapping in is a neutral concept.
Yes.
And it's not all for the light. Or, I mean...
Nothing is.
Not for... not this technology. It's not all for the greater good, is what I'm trying to say. And in that way, I think consistency in truth might have parallels, but that's just a tangent. You were saying that you were interested in obtaining a light, and you had tried all of the different simulacrums, right? Right. Okay, so you landed on one.
Over 2 days, basically, I had tried 6 or 7 hours worth of light. And I wasn't thinking about how this was impacting my endocrine system and all that sort of thing, or my psyche. As a matter of fact, there was a time where I stumbled across a repressed memory under the light. And when I came out, it was one of those spaces where I recognized it as something that I had hidden, but I felt as if I had already integrated that part. It took me probably a month to really integrate everything I had experienced in those 8 or 10 sessions. But during that month, I was non-perturbed. Very little shook me up, and I'm a passionate person. And that was what convinced my wife, who had never had the experience, that this was something that we needed to bring back to our community, was just how I was able to be within myself and comfortable in that space, because I had not always been prior to that.
So there's a lot of lines that can be drawn to the similarities of, I mean, it's almost biblical, seeing something so beautiful it changes you, you know?
People have put it into that context. We had a gentleman who came in, and I just put him under the shortest sampler that we had. And he said he had never believed in God, and now he did. And he felt amazing and relaxed and cried and hugged me. And I asked him if he would like another few minutes under the light, and he said, "No, thank you, that's all I need." And he walked out, and I've never seen him again.
Oh, wow. Now he's a Buddha.
Right?
Or Jesus, one or the other. Goodness. Oh, that's beautiful, though. And I definitely have experienced that, where I've come from a long journey and sat down under the light and then experienced something that was profoundly novel and beautiful. And simply because I've been working on myself, I could integrate that experience into my life, because I appreciate beauty, which is a big part of being an artist. You know, sometimes I argue with my friends about the colors of objects, and I say, I'm a painter, I know what colors are. And so, let me just say, I'm an artist, and I know what beauty is, and this light is fucking beautiful. And people like Dennis McKenna even say that if you have access to technology like this, you might not even need a plant teacher.
Right.
Because the plant teacher inevitably is a sort of shaman that opens you up to your own teaching, right? And that's the integration that you're talking about.
And this is a type of shamanism. This is not new technology. This is just a different application. People have been using this for thousands and thousands of years, you know, meditating in the sun, facing the sunset as it's going down with their eyes closed or open, and absorbing that light and what it does to the body. The sensation, most people can actually even feel it in their physiology if they think about some point in childhood where they're under a tree, and the light is coming through the leaves as they're flickering back and forth in a nice breeze.
I can see that.
And that flicker rate is something that is so relaxing and so divinely connecting within each of us. We use candles for meditation, walls of candles, a candle in front of a mirror or a pool of water, staring into a fire. All of these frequencies exist and have been used by light shamans for millennia.
Dude, you know, staring into fire was actually, Greg Pettit himself told me that he's just spent hours staring into fire.
Yes.
And he's also, I mean, I hope I'm like woven light and stuff, but he says he's seen specific things. You'd have to ask him what. But I've seen very specific things too. Like beings picking up rocks and casting them across the water. And then like the water turns into the light fractal. Like the ripples are like, yeah, only after, 10 minutes.
Yeah.
You have to really get over yourself, because it is like a roller coaster.
It's very much a release of control, and for people who have difficulty releasing control, this is one that can help you, because neurochemically you are finding more serotonin, more melatonin, pinolin, this sort of thing, and it helps you find that conscious, relaxed space where giving up control is possible. It's the fear of the unknown for all of us.
Yeah.
And the thing I hear most when people utilize light and very often, do a meditation in front of the sun is, wow, everything's okay. This recognition that we are safe, that so much of the fear that exists in our society is just the static of what we're told to fear.
Yes. Yeah. That's heavy, man. That sits pretty intensely in my heart because I see that. I know that I was talking about this yesterday with Kara, how like we are hardly ourselves when we're born because we just take on the traits of the people and the environment around us. I was about George Bush when I was in middle school.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Probably because my parents, were about George Bush when I was in middle school. Now, I'm like, it said those things. and I douse my tongue and comment. I'm joking. But the kinds of... And, it's really interesting that this is just a light, which is a lot like how computers send information to one another. But this kind of integration is not unlike a reprogramming of sorts.
Oh, yeah.
Because, I'll put it back to my roots, right?
Or a deprogramming.
A deprogramming, yes. It's a very well-balanced tool that can be used for so many things. Like, it can be, imagine it can be hedonistic, but like most entheogenic experiences, I find that if you try to just indulge too much in those things, you'll hit a wall and, you'll have too much to process and that'll be your life for a minute.
Well, and one of the things that I've found is that it's very self-limiting. Like I was saying, even when people come in and they're drug users and they're excited about the potential of a psychedelic experience, I've had a number of them call me up and say, so I was really into drugs and I'm just not so much right now, and I don't understand where the transition or why the transition happened, and I feel like it happened shortly after the light experience. What the light does by quieting that monkey and allowing you to go into yourself, very often we recognize we are not the characters that have been created for us. We're not the characters created by our parents. We're not the characters created by our government or by our advertising. Institutionally, we're taught we suck.
Yeah.
There's one person, valedictorian, they're good. Everybody else sucks in different levels.
Yeah, man. Yeah, dude.
And to advertise, we use fear and you suck. Your skin is bad. Your teeth are yellow.
Right.
Your hair doesn't have the appropriate sheen. You're not going to get laid without our car. You suck. You suck. You suck. That's the message we get all day long.
Yeah, man. I have entered into a relationship recently with a woman, and just being present for the constant bombardment of culture into her idea of her identity as a woman.
Yes.
It's not unlike an attack.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say it's less an attack and more aggressive of an agenda. It's an aggressive agenda. I don't know if it's an attack, because if it was an attack, people would be, maybe it's an attack if there's money involved. Right? But I say this only so that I can bring to light that as a man, even today, I identify as a man, let me just say. I'm not anything else. I'm just like a human that's a gender male, right? I'm still in the same boat as her somehow, like you're saying, because of, the low-hanging fruit for people is, like, I say I don't eat meat, or I don't buy meat, right? People have almost a responsibility to call you out on that or something, right? Or even speaking up against somebody can be frowned down upon because it puts a target on you. And so how often do we have the opportunity to really go into a place that's unique? It is private. What you're experiencing in the light, you never have to share with anybody. And I just want to stop to say that when we're saying the light, we're literally talking about a machine that's sitting next to us with a light bulb in it that's plugged into the wall with an AC power adapter. I'm not talking about God necessarily. I'm not talking about any religious faction, creed, or denomination. I'm talking about this technological tool that can be used to see absolute beauty. And maybe we can talk a little bit more about why seeing beautiful things is important. Why do you think seeing beauty is important?
Well, the same reason as seeing destruction is important. It gives us perspective and balance.
Yes.
I think that especially with how we are marketed to and how we're inculcated by our instructors, very often we're presented with much of the destruction, the idea of scarcity, fiat currency, all of these mannerisms and ways in which we will say utilize each other without necessarily respecting and appreciating each other.
It's almost like it's a given, right? Like beauty was the first wonder of the world, right? But
Right.
We're moving into a situation as a society where we're separating away from nature. You know, we're building up ourselves away from like the beauty that is.
Well, if we spend our day in fight or flight, working, whether it be in a corporate environment or entrepreneurially, there is levels of anxiety and levels of fear that are being built up within us.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's just adrenaline.
Right. And when you observe something absolutely beautiful, it reminds you of that other perspective, that love does exist, that hope exists, that possibilities exist. And that's one of the magical portions regarding visionary art, is that there is something beyond what we see in the plane that we put in front of us to obtain shiny metal and plastic objects.
Okay, so it's the separation from... Oh, okay, not a separation. I want to say it's the two sides of the membrane, right? The imagination side and the reality side. And then now we're getting into the manifestation territory, where we're talking about bringing things from your imagination into reality through work.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know, for most people who believe in manifestation, and correct me if I'm off from your understanding, but...
It's okay if we're different.
But the way that I've come to understand it through so many people and myself is that most of us who believe in manifestation, number one, believe that there is something beyond the individual that has a greater wisdom, power, creative ability than we as an individual might necessarily be able to access.
Mm-hmm.
And some people believe that's within themselves, and some people believe it's external.
Like the community. So Brian Eno uses a term called the scenius. It's the genius that can only be accessed by being a part of a certain scene. You see what I mean? Yeah. So it's like it is this spirit ghost thing that's floating around the heads of the people who are humble enough to let that genius idea in, but it's specific to who you're hanging out with.
And again, I believe that also falls back into entrainment. It falls into this realm of physics and physiology as much as it does psychology. When you hear people say birds of a feather flock together, it may also be their breath rates, their heart rates, their hormone rates, their neurotransmitters. They're all approaching each other. And the more time they spend together, the more in sync they become.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Kara and I were watching ducks leave the other day. And how they just there's really no lead duck. It just happens.
Exactly. And I can show you a video of a physical entrainment that would really intrigue you, where you take, say, 30 or 40 metronomes. And a metronome has one job, and that's to keep a single beat. Now you take those metronomes and you put them all at different beats. And you start them all at different places within this beat. You put them on a shelf or something that can move gently, and within a matter of 2 to 3 minutes, all of your metronomes will have synced up and they're marching in sync like an army.
I've seen that video and it's kind of creepy. It's like, it stirs something within me that is hopeful yet also humiliating. And in that, when you come to realize that you're a part of a bigger organism, organism,
Yes.
you're merely a character, or you're merely a personality of this bigger thing. And if that doesn't humble you, that's what I mean by the humility of it. It humiliates me because I'm powerless. It takes me into this idea that I'm in nature so much that the inertia of the rocking bench thing, it can throw me off. And I think that at times society feels like you're just out of control.
Well, very much so, and that inertia that you're speaking of and that entrainment where people come together very often is how you end up with things like stampedes and riots and orgies. People think, I would never participate in any one of those things. But when humanity all clicks and everything starts coming together, sometimes if you are not in your space as that individual, you become part of the whole.
Yes, this is a good thing to talk about. I'm wearing a Question Authority shirt right now, so it's kind of perfect for what we're talking about right now. Honestly, my mother gave this to me. The same mother who, like George Bush, gave me this Question Authority shirt.
She's learned.
She has learned. Yes, Monica, we are all learning together. I love you, Mom. And the thing is, Timothy Leary used to say Question Authority, right? But it's not the same. It's not like an aggressive thing, it's not like militantly oppose authority.
No.
It's like philosophically take a gander at what's going on. And even Jesus Christ used to say in the Bible, live in the world, not of the world.
Right.
Which is I think that means question authority, man.
Very much so. And in that book, you also have Jesus standing up and saying, "But Rabbi, does it not say?"
Yeah. Dude, Jesus does some funny stuff in the Bible, like I have this whole shtick about like why Jesus was crucified, and it was like he went into a temple and people were pimping and gambling, and he was so mad he went up on a mountain and peered down into the valley where the temple was, and then he slaughtered a cow and tanned its leather, tanned it into leather, and then for every turned that into a whip, and then for every sin that he saw in the temple, he put a diamond or something at the end of the whip, and then he premeditated this shit for however long it takes to tan a cow. He was like, those fucking goddamn people in the temple, I'm gonna get them. And then he goes up in the temple and he starts throwing tables and whipping people. And my whole thing is he probably whipped Pontius Pilate's son, right? And then Pontius Pilate went like, "Daddy, Jesus Christ ruined my gambling game." And then just like Life of Brian, he sent Biggest Dickus to go get him, and the rest is history.
That's an intriguing perspective.
Oh, it's all just that was more for entertainment purposes. I digress. Back to what we were talking about. How this idea. I mean, that you gotta have some balls to do that. I'm fucking Jesus. I could do this shit. Today, I mean, that wouldn't fly, right? Anybody saying, "I'm the son of God," did that, you'd probably be like, "That guy's crazy. Lock him up." But the divinity can do a lot for a man, dude. Which which is not unlike what we're talking about. How when you question authority, you enter into a realm of self-divinity. And this is the whole idea between Martin Luther, how you can reach these levels of integrated divinity.
And that's, it's interesting you mentioned Martin Luther. Martin Luther was looking internally and then questioned authority externally. I think that questioning authority externally is very important. It's a basis of science. We question what the current thing is, we evaluate it, we run tests, we check those tests, and we question what the authoritative answer is.
Yeah.
Now, if you don't wear a white coat when you do it, people make fun of you. But I think questioning authority in every realm is important, including within the self realm. And that's one of the biggest ones to check in on is, okay, what is my authority here, and why am I speaking for, against, or with something?
Yes, these kinds of questions are not... They come about when you go into these meditative states, right? I mean, I begin to think about really like how does this experience really apply to my life? And is my experience my authority? Is my victimization of myself through my history the authority of my life that I choose to put back into the world? Is my president my authority because I feel bad that he's my president? No. If anything, I'm working hard to construct a model for appreciation for this. What can I learn and apply to myself through this bizarre situation? Life's bizarre. This might just be a dream. Who knows? I think it's based reality.
Well, and right now we are watching something unusual happen, and the theater that is politics is a little wilder than usual.
For sure.
Now, I've not seen a press on a president by the press like this in my lifetime.
Interesting.
I am not a fan of Mr. Trump, and I would say that we are only looking at one side of what's going on, and that's a side that's being presented to us. I find that so many times now, like Melania Trump, she came in as an immigrant. She speaks 5 languages. She has been quite graceful and amenable to the country, and yet people who claim to be for women and claim to be for understanding and for immigrants and for just general respectful nature, then we see out of those camps images of her nude and a regular mocking of this person, making fun of everything from how she dresses to her accent.
This is interesting. So women can express themselves through their body just being. And that is an idea of, female power coming to be. It's like, I am this, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Excuse me. It was too beautiful. I kind of fucked up. I appreciate that. And I think that the theater, as you were saying it, you have to think of it but not in it.
Because otherwise it's used for polarization, and you'll find people defending the indefensible for their red or blue team.
Yeah.
And they get lost in the tribalism of it, which is part of why we use the dualistic approach rather than a representative republic kind of approach.
Yes. The tribal mindset is a survival instinct, is it not?
It is.
It goes into this whole thing we're talking about how fight or flight is... Now, I've been in a lot of counseling in my life just because I've endured trauma. So, like anybody, I would hope. And in the course of these counsels, years of time in counseling, I've found that anxiety is your fight or flight response. And what's happening is your body is literally pumping adrenaline into your system because animalistically, there's a part of your mind that feels like the only way you're going to survive in the now is by either combating this thing, and that can be passive aggressively, mentally, it can be self-harm through codependency. It gets deep because society has gone off on a tangent from real tribalism, or to just really run away. And running away can be suppression, or any of those things, dude. It's all the same thing, but there's another way, isn't there?
Yeah, there's another way. And trying to find places of connection rather than places of division can be challenging if it's not your normal frequency. And what we can do is start looking at what's within us that upsets us. Typically, it's when we're upset about something, it's either righteous indignation or it's self-accountability.
Yes.
And very often those two are tied together. And we realize it's something that it's coming back into our lap, and we actually have to participate and do something rather than sit back and allow those we've said, okay, you're the lesser evil of this lesser evil, and you're the lesser evil of this lesser evil. And we have all of these lesser evils combining their efforts together, and we expect them to create something beautiful, wonderful, and not evil for us.
But it ultimately adds up to a pile of poop.
And it comes back to the self. And as long as we just keep shipping it off to people with hair good enough that we can appreciate their lying to us,
Hair good enough
then
that we appreciate their lies. That's so good.
then we're not going to be able to make responsible, accountable decisions for ourselves and our communities.
And that's why Buddha was bald.
Beautiful.
I feel like I save anybody on this podcast from taking themselves too seriously when I can end it with a lighthearted joke that does show us that, as serious and important as whatever we're talking about right now, I think that the important things shouldn't be taken too importantly. You know what I mean? Like, this light that we're talking about, it's not the basket we should put all our eggs in.
Oh, absolutely not.
But neither is any other form of shamanism that you can't describe yourself. You see what I mean? And I've talked a lot about, the Bible. But this is because my experience comes from an education that's seated in those kinds of traditions. It's not that I appreciate all other practices to the extent that they're not hurting anybody just as much, because I think that they can bring real senses of appreciation outside of these fight or flight circumstances. And the way you do that is by not taking yourself so seriously. I said it kind of briefly, but it's okay that we're different. That's totally fine. And you don't need to understand somebody's creed, dominion, or affiliation to appreciate the difference.
Yeah.
It's like the 8 different simulacrums for the light. You had to experience it, right?
Yeah.
But do we have to experience it all?
We experience what we need to experience. And it's one of the things that I find challenging, because business-wise, people want me to tell them what it's going to take for them to get from point A to point B.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to know, how many times do I need to do this? And I don't know. This really is about what's happening within an individual. And getting people to turn within themselves and self-monitor and feel is another process by which we can all start coming together. The more we identify and feel who we are and understand who we are as an individual, the better we can connect with everybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. Somehow, it requires balance, though. And I admit, English is kind of an interesting language to deal with all this stuff. Like, I started this podcast so we can make new words. I think that's an important part of moving into the future. Like, love, there should really be like 8 words for that. But, you know, I talk about how we have all these like one-syllable words for like things you could...
Huge concepts.
Yeah, you could... If you started a conversation about truth and at the same time dug a hole until you figured it out, you would die digging that hole. You know, or about love even too. Or you could just say, it's simple, you know? Terence McKenna said, life is really pretty simple until you try to explain it.
Yes.
And I think it's, you know, I mean, you know, fuck me, I'm doing a podcast about trying to explain life, but I think this is less about trying to explain my motives to people and maybe trying to explain my hope to people. Because this idea of tapping into a conversation with beauty, if you will, it saves you. It saves me. It's actively saving me. Because it's turning my life that was destitute, rock bottom, you know, assassination attempts, exploding, being hit by a car, getting kicked out of my house, drug addiction, all of that in the course of a year was enough for me to say, this is horribly hideous. And at times I wanted to give up, but there is other things in store for me. And I want to share that story with people because it inspires me. And I hope people get inspired, man. But I'm wary to do so because you can tap into anything, and it's not only for good. That's the interesting thing. And that's why I'm on this podcast now, is because I know that people will be inspired by whatever the artist does. This is part of the war of the art. You know, is that when you work, you will inspire. And, you know, that's what the idea of haters are, you know. It's like, those are really people who inspire you, right?
I did not
haters.
acknowledge being an artist. I had created art for different businesses and sold it for years and years. And it wasn't until someone talked me into putting up a little piece of work that I did, political decoupage. And they said, put it up at First Thursday. So I put it on a little stand out by the street on Congress. And people came by, looked at it. This one guy looked at it from like 10 directions. And then kicked it out into the street in front of a moving vehicle.
What the fuck?
And that was not my first thought. My first thought was, I'm an artist.
That's so fucking perfect. I don't have words right now, but that's so fucking awesome.
And that was the realizing moment.
I
impacted somebody.
Holy shit, dude. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And it's this, I mean, I think that might be the idea of the band Tool. You know, like, I was listening to it the other day, and it was pretty jarring when I was trying to relax, and I didn't listen to the whole album, but before, when I was in high school, dude, I was blasting that stuff every day because it was expressing to me the turmoil I was feeling.
Frequency and vibration, the keys to the universe.
Yeah, dude, it's fascinating. It really is fascinating. Nowadays, I've found that I can do the same thing, and this is what I mean when I've heard it said that you can be committed to truth instead of consistency, right? And for me, this means that I'm committed to change as a person. This is what Maynard told me when I asked him how fatherhood changed his perspective as to what music could be released. You know, like, because Maynard is the, you know, whatever, whoever's listening knows. He's lead singer of Tool. he's, you know, his music is so different. You know, you've got Tool, which is like this, you know, it's hardcore, it's metal, but then there's Pussifer, which is like immaculate beauty about mountains and streams and stuff. And like, I mean, Tool's just as beautiful, but it's different, right? And I've got to ask, you know, why is it different? Is it because you're a dad? You know, that seems to be a big theme in the music. And he thought for a second. Well, first he asked me what I meant. so I was like, shit. That's how I rephrased. But then his simple answer was, I just changed. And then the music changed too. It was a simple thing. It wasn't a big, like, I need to make different music because I've made a decision. It was just like, oh no, it's just a simple changing of the seasons.
Yes.
That's what the novelty of the light can bring. It disrupts you from your patterns. And if you're a person who's stuck in their patterns or their habits, I mean, if I'm a person who's stuck in my patterns and my habits, then I'm more a stone Buddha than I think. Not that I'm a Buddha. I still get super angry and throw my back out and, you know, all this stuff. But if I'm a Buddha, you're a Buddha, and we'll be okay. Cheers to that.
I'm a Buddha, you're a Buddha.
And we're a Buddha too. You know what, dude? That's a pretty good place. It's a pretty good place to wrap it up, I feel. We've been chilling all day. You know, let's bring it all back around to the setting we're in. The Gallery Lucid, which is, you know, if this podcast can be a testament to the intention of this space, I would hope that it can be communicated impeccably. To anybody who listens to this, like, there's a space for you, and it's gaining attention, and there's art selling. I imagine that there's going to be a few more shows, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely.
I know I'm definitely going to be working with you to help promote those things because I really believe in art galleries.
I'm really honored, and anytime you've ever come around, you've always been a beautiful light. I realize that we have our shadows, but you've never really shared those other than in anecdote.
You know what? You have to really get to know me before I feel like I can share that part of myself with you.
I look forward to it.
Oh, shit, dude. I mean, that is where my work is, you know. This is where I say I'm not the Buddha because I know I'm not perfect. Like, where, like, I've tried to be very open with a lot of people. But either there's a miscommunication, which is bound to happen, or one of us didn't feel like we had time to talk about something long enough. That builds up kind of like an anti-callus, and, you know, you know what I mean? It just turns into a pressure point is what an anti-callus is, really. But what's beautiful is that I hopefully have connected close enough to those people to realize that we're still holding space for each other through that, right?
Yeah.
Because we're striving to be the Buddha without imitating it, right? And that's the whole idea behind Western consciousness, I think, is that we can try. You know, we can try. It's okay. You have permission to try to work on yourself. Right. You deserve it. It's not hurting anybody. It's only helping.
Here.
Word, dude.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you're interested in any massage therapy, Reiki, or light therapy, please follow the links to the Gallery Lucid website below in the comments. If you're interested in the music you're hearing, I'll recount that this music is by Elliot Rogers and myself, and the links to our appropriate SoundCloud pages are also in the comments. It means so much to me that you take time to listen to this stuff, and I want to assure you that I take time to listen to it also. I wouldn't upload anything that I haven't already heard at least 3 times, and I promise that. Thank you so much for helping me, and I hope you are. See y'all later. Bye.